Tesla and the catch the falling knife phenomenon. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. So today we're focused on the fact that Tesla is actually, the stock price has been moving around a great deal. And our objective is to sort of give you guys some perspective on what's going on with that. We're also obviously working on improving our sound quality, and this includes that. And if you cannot hear me, please let me know and I will crank up the gain. But we're trying to make sure that sound is premium as much as possible, especially with a brand new mic that really helps that process. So before we dive into today's show and the concept of catching the falling knife as a trading strategy, I wanted to do a couple of house cleaning items. The first item is that we do have a number of you that are interested in purchasing pre-IPO shares of SpaceX. We wanted to note to you that the issue that's going on is that the cost of the trip is $5,000. It is a 3-day trip to California. We visit JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab / Caltech. We go to SpaceX. We also visit a boring project. So the cost is high, but it actually is a lot of work to both gain access and provide access to all these locations. So there are many of you that have expressed interest, but I have not responded to you. And part of the reason was that I wanted to first note what the cost was to a small group of people and then give the information to a larger group of people so we understood what kind of questions might pop up. And so I also have to admit that our channel is doing great, and we have a lot of folks that are happy to learn with us and from us. And as a result, the focus has really been, that's the cost of it. If you have an inclination not to do it, that's fine. But exchanging 5 emails of argument about the cost of the trip, it doesn't change the cost of it. It just wastes your time and mine. So happy to respond to those that are interested in going on the trip as a precursor to buying shares in SpaceX. But it is a due diligence trip, and there are several components to the trip, including meeting other folks that are going to be part of the team that help with your out opportunities if the IPO is delayed. So we're going to leave that for now. The next thing I wanted to note to you is I want to thank all of you, both Patreon supporters, etc., for your consideration. We'll take questions at the end of the show, but I also wanted to note to you that we'll do 1 or 2 emails with you offline in the Patreon setting. But if you want to push it to 5, 10 emails, after 5 emails on responses, you're going to get the $50 email bill, let's call it, and the higher the number, the higher the number. If you want to just do unlimited email where I stop everything I'm doing, you pay $500 a month and you can email anytime you want, night or day, and we'll respond. But the volume that's there means that we have to find a way to sort of truncate that list so that we can have time to do research and execute the show. So let's get down to business here when it comes to catch the falling knife. That title, I wanted to encourage you to type it into YouTube and watch some of the videos on a trading strategy that's called Catch the Falling Knife. The reason I chose this topic today is that as Tesla stock price was falling yesterday, when it was at about 700 a share, I was having an email exchange with one of my options class students. I do a 1-hour one-on-one options sort of lessons class, and then I follow up with responding to sort of trading thoughts with those students after you take the class. So one of my students and I were exchanging notes as things were falling yesterday, and we started discussing the fact that with the stock price falling like that, instead of actually running for the exits, it actually might be a great time to buy the stock. And so he has a sizable $1 million position and he started adding shares to his holdings as we closed in on $700 yesterday. So this sounds kind of crazy, but the whole idea is that there are some people that are running for the exits, while this is an opportunity for others to get into the stock at a better price. The reason why I kind of feel like where we are now is an opportunity is we actually had a discussion, or have a discussion going right now. And the discussion is what's happening with institutional investors is a constant theme. So the way the theme is playing out here is that, as you know, there's one analyst that gave Tesla an $800 price target. There's Colin from Oppenheimer, Colin Durst, actually, he was green light to 612, but he was saying in his model he possibly gets up into that 700 range. And so this is sort of the upper end of where fund managers buying at those prices will actually be, can do so comfortably, because when their bosses ask, what did you buy it for? And did you have coverage in the form of analysts that validated the buy price? The answer they have to have is yes. And if they don't have that answer and things don't go well, those are people that could lose their jobs. So you really have these folks protecting themselves. And so you'll notice there's a theme going here, which is we're kind of focused on, or everyone's kind of focused on, what are the fundamentals being used by the large institutions when they're purchasing certain stocks, including Tesla, and to what degree does your buying process mirror the strategy and structure of what these folks will do. So all that said, 700 actually seems like a pretty good price. I think that someplace in that 650 to 750, 800 range is kind of where Tesla will hang out until we see more earnings, et cetera. So again, I wanted to encourage you to read about Catch the Falling Knife. It's a trading strategy. Yes, this is investing in stock, and there are many of you who have large holdings that are long term, but you have to admit that as the stock price was falling, there was sort of mental activity going, in the sense of, is this thing going to crash to the floor? What's really going on? And the answer is that there's really a wait for opportunities to purchase at prices that are attractive. And I think we saw that in terms of what was going on yesterday, in terms of how low things went as they recovered. And then if we look at what's happening today, I believe the stock is up $15 in pre-market. It looks like sort of this whole concept is playing out, and there's no huge negative change in the fundamentals of the company to validate any further fall than we're at currently. So the next thing I wanted to review is kind of what's going on in China, because the next earnings round is going to be here in another, we just finished the last one, I agree, but we're 6 weeks theoretically from the next round of earnings, and China's a big part of that conversation. So kind of what we're seeing and hearing out of there is actually a big deal. And for those of you who are viewers, I think there's Paul, there are a couple of you that are in China that have been sort of sending us notes on what's going on. And we actually appreciate your doing so, because underneath there, all the other viewers can sort of learn more that we don't have knowledge of, but is supported by your input. So I have to say, wow on Wuhan. Clearly, there are a number of countries that have flown their compatriots out and leaving the native citizens there to sort of suffer. I particularly looked on BBC, and there are certain families that are mixed between British and Chinese couples, and the government is saying that the British person can go home, but he has to leave his wife and child in Wuhan, and it's nerve-wracking to see those folks suffer the fate of having to stay and potentially die. And so I'd say it's a pretty amazing circumstance to have the city walled off and have all these cases that are being dealt with, and then having comments made about their hospitals where they're actually doing triage, where they're allowing the most severely ill to come to the hospitals, but the rest have to come back after they get sicker. So some of the stuff there I'm really, really surprised by. How does this affect Tesla? The answer is the 9th is expected start, so I guess that's Monday, is our expected restart of production at Tesla. The other question is who's going to buy cars while they're quarantined? And I mean, the argument one could make is that China won't restart business. It's going to stay shut down for a couple of months, maybe a year. I just don't see the economy able to just stop because of one item. I think there'll be intense preventative measures. For example, one of our Chinese visitors has articulated that he expects things to get semi back to normal as the number of cases not in Wuhan is falling, and a lot of people are choosing to move back into e-commerce as a way to minimize contact in public spaces. So, I think this is kind of makes sense. One of the things that I think is sort of interesting blazing off of this is that, I don't know if you've seen this, but in Hong Kong and a couple of other places, there are people who went on cruise ships that they found 10 people or more who were infected on the cruise ship. So everybody has to be quarantined on a cruise ship for 2 weeks to find out who has the disease. And I just think that that's a mind-boggling situation. I bring this up because, if you're looking at shorting something, looking at the stock prices of things like Marriott and some of those cruise companies would probably be in line, given that their businesses are going to get smashed, particularly if they have Chinese exposure relative to customers. So obviously the airlines are already getting hit, but I think their ancillary companies get hit in this process. So in terms of Tesla in Shanghai, the one other thing that's burning on the brain regarding that situation is that Elon announced the Model Y, both here in the United States, it'll start showing up in a few weeks, as well as in China. It's possible that the SUVs can be ordered by Chinese citizens from Fremont, but the version produced in China won't start arriving until next year. And the reason we see that is the fact that when you look at the volume of demand/orders that was going on and the number of cars ordered, the line kept getting longer and longer. It sort of became obvious that we're in a situation where there's a huge amount of demand for that vehicle, and they just couldn't make enough, given their current access to batteries and other resources, to build those vehicles. So I just didn't see how they were going to do the Model Y, and I was very surprised to see Elon introduce it in a manner that he did, in which they just had a photo of it without a real vehicle there. So again, we'll keep you posted on this, because how China does, the earnings that we see coming from them, is one of the next legs of what's going to happen with the stock going forward. So, the final, let's say, 5 minutes of the show here, I wanted to sort of, maybe review in general thought processes on what we saw in terms of stock price movement. If you're a regular watcher of our show, we pointed out that once we got to the point where the shorts had been sort of blown out, you kind of have a downdraft in the stock price back down to some normal prices, driven by the fact that the shorts that got killed are now had to, in essence, buy their way out of their trades. And once they're out, you kind of lose the number of people you need to keep pushing on the stock price of the company. So hence, sort of the whole structure of what we've seen occurred. We kind of went over it over the last couple of 3 weeks. What I started thinking about, so there's this whole structure to how a month works on a stock, and for any stock for that matter. And one of our sort of core objectives is to walk you through the calendar of what to expect at different times, so that as you see data, you sort of compare that data against what the norms are for the environment. So a couple examples would be, we talked about the 3-day rule. So as soon as earnings come out, it takes about 3 days for the analyst to write the report, 3 business days, and then for an opportunity for folks to dive in and trade against what's happening. So particularly the institutions. So we kind of predicted a February 10th for the 1,000 stock price, sort of based on this stair-step logic. And you want to kind of understand that because it might affect when you're buying shares and at what prices. So I wanted to note that today's private show will really go granular on this concept of reviewing the sort of quarterly calendar of how companies operate and how you kind of don't want to make any mistakes there, particularly on your buy or sell side, because in Tesla's case, small mistakes by a day or two can be very expensive. So the one aspect that I'll review with you today that I think is pretty amazing to watch is if you'll go and look back on Friday of this past week. So we did a show on Thursday. What we pointed out is that there's something called the pinning process on Fridays, which is the market makers are trying to push the stock price as low as possible because all the options above that price, particularly the call options, will expire worthless. So they get paid the lower the stock price is because there are a bunch of people who lose money on their options. So what we kind of covered, is the fact that they would not allow the stock price to move beyond, let's say, 650 last week. And I was thinking about it yesterday, the fact that I was kind of upset and I was feeling like some of those guys at Goldman Sachs and other places are losing their grip. And the reason is that if you'll notice, the stock price on Friday ended at 650 and like 73 cents. So the 73 cents I was kind of shocked by because it was supposed to end up at 649 and like 73 cents, making all the 650s worthless. So I would just say those guys are really good, but that 73 cents, I can't believe you guys allowed those regular citizens to actually make it over a key price point for that stock / option. So it's Thursday right now, and we've already reviewed in general what tends to happen on Fridays. I do believe that we're heading into another pinning process, and based on where the stock price is currently, it feels like 750 is our pin best candidate for this week. So the reason I emphasize looking at last week's number is you have to ask yourself an interesting question, which is, okay, why is it that there's an asset that on Friday was worth 650, namely the stock price of Tesla, but when you got into Monday and Tuesday, it pushed all the way almost to $1,000. So a portion that we discussed was what was happening with the hedge fund managers. The other portion that you have to sort of think through is obviously the institutions were a part of it. And so there was kind of a lockstep of buys and sells that went on in that process. So what I wanted to review here is the fact that that's a pretty huge. So if you just intellectually step back and say to yourself, how can something be worth $600 or $650 a share on Friday, but on Tuesday it's worth $1,000 a share or double the price? And so 200 of those shares is definitely the shorts getting killed as they were heading to close out their positions. But the rest of that was just orderly buying by institutions, and in particular, orderly buying at the 3 days out from when earnings were announced. So it sounds zany, but the 3-day rule actually is valid, and it's something that you want to think about in terms of the process by which certain stocks, all stocks move on this because there are analysts that observe the companies and write reports. But it's a kind of a big deal if you're thinking about large amounts of money and high movements of the stock price to be aware of this. So, at any rate, I think that, for those of you who are long holders of the stock, which there are many of you, obviously you're doing well. Congratulations. I do think that catch the falling knife is a concept that you want to kind of read about, pull up some YouTube videos and watch how the charts work on it, because it is a trading strategy more so than it is an investing strategy, because typically people are investing over the long haul. And the biggest concept there is something called dollar cost averaging. So it basically means that there are people that will continue to buy a certain stock regardless of price in small quantities on a long-term basis, expecting great returns in the long term. And so that tends to be more of an investing strategy because it's an over a long-term period, where that catch the falling knife tends to be more of a trading strategy that people do in fairly short-term periods of time. So, you know, what we're finding is there are some people that are trading options for sure. There are some people that are trading stocks, but by understanding what's happening in each of those pools, you don't have to play in them, but it can be helpful to sort of understand what's going on in different places. And so that's sort of one of our principal goals is you understand what people are doing and why, and then you can almost do the jump rope routine where you're sort of thinking through what you're doing and being able to observe how and why people are doing certain things. So as we've shared previously, the other thing we're waiting on is, you know, Colin indicated that there should be some 700 affirmations for prices coming out, and that I think would help stabilize the stock around where it's at now. I think it's very clear that the institutions are making it known, you know, the price that they're willing to pay, which is around this. And so therefore, that's why we're sort of, you know, I feel like we're kind of locked into this space. Great. Yes. On the pre-IPO, you know, SpaceX stuff, we've shared you general info. Please, if you're interested in the SpaceX, again, the trip is 5K for the due diligence trip. You can send me an email at Teslafaninsight, admin@teslafaninsight.com. Just drop a piece of email there and I can interface with you further. Again, a little bit of foot dragging on our side because we know what it costs to do a good job of it, and that's the cost of doing business. So please, if you don't want to do it, it's okay, but I'm not going to go through 5 emails with you, you know, justifying what it costs to get the trip done. Once you land in Greater Los Angeles, we cover all the expenses from there. But, you know, that's the cost of the trip. And if you'd like to come and therefore access our process of getting shares, no problem, we can do that. The one other SpaceX comment I want to make is that we do have a couple of our larger supporters that are not able to make the trip or might be in Europe, et cetera. And we do have a, you know, more like a 2K remote access to that trip that we'll be doing. It adds headaches, but obviously you're not there, so there are lower expenses. I wanted to note this to you because we're going to do some remote things in terms of, you know, very limited access via television to those locations of what we're doing. But when we're truly inside of the building, you know, we can sort of update afterwards, but there's a low likelihood that you're going to have, we're going to be allowed to run around with cameras on proprietary stuff that they're doing. It's more going to be eyeball. So that portion of it, I think, won't be as good, but the rest of the trip will be easily able to document with videos so that you can get some exposure plus exposure through videography to the other investors so that if you choose to invest, you can. So that structure is going to be $2,500, pretty much half the cost of if you actually showed up, but it addresses all the costs of putting that thing together and executing. So it's up to you if you want to do it, but please, I will not have an argument with you about it because our plan on it is if it happens because we have folks interested in executing accordingly, great. If it doesn't, you know, it's not a major issue on my part. Any rate, wow, interesting comments popping up here a little bit. Any rate, I wanted to thank you for taking time out to join us today. Just a reminder, 1 or 2 mails, you know, no problem. You'll get a bill if you push it beyond that because, you know, the time is valuable. And on the other hand, if you want to have emails anytime you want in multiple forms, chip in your $500 a month and you can do that. But we definitely want to be responsive to as many people as we can. And by you going 10 or 15 emails in a week, it makes it difficult for us to make sure everyone gets at least some contact or fielding of a question that they may not want to do in a public forum. So, at any rate, I I wanted to thank you all for joining us. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Don't forget our health tips. Please consider 25 leg lifts per leg on a daily basis to strengthen your quad muscles. Please also take time to not go to bed within 2 hours of eating, preferably 4 hours to let the food fully digest. Also wanted to encourage you to hold on fried foods to once a week is another thought. And then finally on our health tips, I'm kind of working on a health aspect. There's a 10-day sugar challenge the New York Times did. And I ran into a post-cancer patient, and he was pointing out to me, Greg, what people don't realize is when you drink orange juice or any of those straight sugar runs, it's really hard on your body. So if you think about it, when you have an orange, if you eat the inside of the orange or a grapefruit or whatever it is, there's fiber and other things that come with that. When you're going straight juice, evidently it's really harder in your body in terms of the hit. So they also point out sugar addiction is kind of normal in our society. So I just wanted to relate to you the fact that I'm definitely working on figuring out how to reduce my sugar consumption and using certain processes to do so, like eat the fruit versus drinking the juice. So we'll see how this comes together. I wanted to, as usual, thank all of you for saying hello, etc. It's easy to do shows when everything's going great. It's harder to do shows when it's not, as we are in right now. But I think things are still pretty solid, and we're in very, very good shape. Just a reminder, we have another show today, the third for the week. For those of you who are Patreon supporters, at the $20 level, you actually get between 2 and 3 shows a week. At the $5 and $10 level, that sort of qualifies you for 1 extra private show a week. And so I think it'll be worthwhile time-wise because we go more granularly into sort of what happened this week and some ideas and trading strategies that we really can't do in a public forum that we can do in a private forum for you, plus kind of field questions in that space. Wow. It's funny, there's a comment regarding I love the health plan part of the show. I had a funny experience. I was actually driving Lyft, and I met a doctor, and he sort of quizzed on our top 10 health tips. And I basically interviewed about 200 doctors, many of them at the NIH, about really good health practices. So we have our top 10 list, and this guy looked at me and he goes, I want to hear the top 10. So I told him the top 10, and he's like, well, I just retired as the head of Georgetown Hospital, and all your list is actually valid. And I agree that it's valid because all the stuff we're telling you comes from specialists in each of the areas that we've done. So I think that I usually try to be very fast with our health tips at the end, but I think based on responses that I get in a survey from you guys, instead of it being a health tip reminder for, 60 seconds or 90 seconds, I think what I may do is start going on a 1 minute for each of our health tips and kind of where we got the information and how it works, because that way, the way we work the show is by the time you get to the end of it, if you get to the end for the health tips, you're interested, and it's up to you. We're not violating our agreement to just discuss Tesla, but the issue is that Tesla or no, we all have health issues we got to manage, and hence why we've decided to include that information, particularly as you age, that stuff become a bigger issue. So we do have a top 10 list. We usually stick to 4 or 5, but with encouragement, we'll sort of build out the entire list and maybe add to it over time so that you can benefit from trying out what we've discussed, and you can look up the doctors that were referred, because what I couldn't believe is those guys charge $1,000 an hour for you to talk with them about an issue like this. So it's kind of fun to be able to get the information without paying the $1,000 an hour. Any rate, that said, there's one guy that sort of got me. There's a professor at the University of Louisville who is a upper respiratory doc, and what he pointed out to me is that what people don't realize is, number one, when you eat and go to bed, there's a bunch of bile produced in your stomach to digest that food. So when you're laying down, that bile basically rolls up into your upper respiratory area, and that actually causes cancer, which is what he treats. So what he indicated to me was three things. Number one, you definitely want to wait until 4 hours before you go to bed because all that food will be digested and you don't have that bile rolling into your upper respiratory area. The second thing he pointed out was that um, there are a lot of people that think they're outsmarting the um, uh, they think they're outsmarting your body by saying, "Oh, I've got acid reflux. Why don't I use an over-the-counter?" So what he indicated to us was that, guess what? Uh, you get relief, but the relief relieves gives you relief, but the damage that's being done is still there. So I kind of point this out to you because if you do have these issues and you are getting temporary relief, it doesn't mean that it's working. It just means that the pain has been reduced, but the damage to your body that you were getting from that is still there. So this is an example of what I mean of kind of where we got the information from. So I thought it was funny because people were like, well, you came up with this wrong. I literally interviewed some of the top doctors in the world to figure out this stuff. So when you hear these health tips, they're not just an off-the-cuff job. The one last one that pops to mind is that at Stanford, we have something called a sleep research clinic. So there's a doctor there named Dr. William Dement that I worked with when I was an undergrad at Stanford. I worked in his lab, and what I found interesting was that he's the one that came up with the term REM, as in rapid eye movement while you're sleeping. Literally, he would sit next to people as they were reading and record data on what they were doing. And the REM was something that he identified, and he came up with that term. And so I wanted to mention this to you because sleep is not something that is discussed a lot, but it is a rotation when it comes to med school. And what I wanted to mention about this that I thought was awesome is that Dr. Dement really points out that what you want to do with your sleep is maintain the same sleep schedule for a 2-week period every day. The reason for that is your body will get into a certain rhythm. And once you figure out what your body's rhythm is in terms of what time it likes to get up, what time it likes to sleep, eat, etc., you actually are doing a service to yourself in terms of your health. So one of the worst things he pointed out you can do is go through the week's work and then on Friday and Saturday night staying up real late. You basically are sending your circadian rhythm off cycle. That's why it takes a couple of days at the beginning of the week to sort of regain the cycle that you're on. So if you're really a hardcore viewer of us, please take some time to maintain a consistent sleep schedule for a couple of weeks and then see how you feel about that. See what time your body likes to get up or go to sleep. The other concept that was shared was that if you can bend your work schedule to how your sleep-wake schedule works, that can really be also a benefit, to you in that process. So I just wanted to throw that out because sort of sleep research is an area that I developed some knowledge of, not because I'm a doctor, but just because if you're in the lab and you're going through patients and stuff like that, it's very easy to sort of get a command of what's going on and how to, if you will, develop better sleep etiquette. So any rate, I just want to thank all of you for joining us. Again, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Just one more other tip, and that is that you can hear the different languages that I speak at the end. I wanted to encourage some of you who don't speak other languages to just try slowing or replaying the tape and practicing a couple of those other languages. Again, what we're looking at is mental health as you age. And so one of those techniques is to learn new languages or play instruments or other things. So it's not that complex. I'm explaining which language it is so you can go ahead and look it up and have like other people that are native speakers do it. But making the effort to pick up stuff like this can be the sort of little details that help you maintain mental faculties. So anyway, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, mach's gut. German, au revoir. French, lehit road. Hebrew, Hoda Hafez. Farsi, Zdravstvuyte. Hello in Russian, Das Vidanya, which is goodbye, but Ni hao ma in Chinese, hello. Hej do, Swedish. Do widzenia, Polish. And in Jamaica, we say, no respect, walk good man. Thanks for joining us, and please let us know if you can hear us better. We're playing around with the gain to get the right levels, and we'd appreciate your input to make sure you can hear and understand. Anyway, have a great day. Bye for now. We look forward to our Patreon-only show for today, and then we'll see you guys tomorrow heading into the Friday trading day.